With that, we're going to get right into our 3:45 session. Just about 60 seconds late, but I'd like to welcome you to our session is titled Women as Leader in Crisis Management. And we are so fortunate today to have a panel of industry leaders that can advise and mentor us all on how to encourage more women to succeed in what was once believed to be a male-only industry. These leaders are going to share their expertise and lessons learned to help us all raise awareness of women as leaders in your organizations, how to get involved with other women that are advancing this important cause, and build recognition and take action to serve the needs and talents of the women in these fields. So with that, our panel moderator is Heather Geldart. She is the Integrated Programs Manager, Arlington County, Virginia Department of Public Safety Communications and Emergency Management. And I'd like to welcome Heather to moderating this session and ask her to please introduce her four panelists. So with that, Heather, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Dave. I appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for one of the last panels of this 3-day virtual symposium. So as Dave mentioned, the discussion here is focused around the successes of women in emergency management and crisis. You know, while DEI or equity and inclusion has become a necessary discussion driver, many of the women on this panel were leading during crisis before DEI became an acronym. And some of these women were influenced by other pioneers in the field, such as Secretary Napolitano, Nancy Ward, Beth Zimmerman, and countless others. Just to note, women have been leading in this sector since its inception. The women on this panel have forged discernible actions within DHS and have combined over 100 years of service to this sector. From leading coordination efforts around the immigration crisis at the border to serving as president to the largest collection of emergency managers and probably civilian-owned 511s, to reimagining and implementing true public-private cooperation in response and recovery. The experience on this panel is vast. So ladies, please take a moment to introduce yourselves. Sherry, if you could please start with the introductions and we'll go around the horn.
Let's see, Sherry, is she on? There she is. She's unmuted. She's muted.
Sherry, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
And then I lost my video. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I'm the Vice President of the Energy Marketers of America. We represent the folks who distribute fuel from the terminals to the gas stations and the schools and the airports and the marinas. And so we're at the front line during a disaster.
Wonderful. We'll go over to Kathy.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Clark, and I think it was already alluded to that the role that I'm sharing with today is part of the International Association of Emergency Managers. I'm currently the president of the board of directors, but my day job is at the great state of Minnesota, where I work in our division of emergency communication networks. I have a very long background also in Homeland Security and emergency management. So I look forward to our discussion here today. Thank you.
Wonderful, Kathy. Thank you. Mary Ann.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mary Ann Tierney. I'm the regional administrator for FEMA Region 3, and I'm here today from the National Hurricane Center. So happy to be here.
Wonderful. And many of you who have been participating in the symposium probably recognize Persia Payne-Hurley. Persia, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Hey everybody, I'm Persia Payne-Hurley. I'm the private sector manager for North Carolina Emergency Management. I also coordinate our business EOC. I've got the honor of being the chair of the All Hatches Consortium Private Sector State Liaison Committee. And I also serve on OnStar's Public Safety Council.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pay close attention to the chat and the Q&A, but please enter questions as you have them. But to start the conversation, I've developed a few of my own in coordination with the panelists. So in looking at your bios, many of you have had different points of entry into this field. So my first question is, how do you begin to chart a career in today's emergency management and homeland security sector? And I'm gonna actually start with Kathy, just because of the IEM presidency, and you probably have the most influence in the youth of our sector and how the junior employees have been coming in.
Well, it's really great because there's so many more opportunities than many of us that began as a second career into emergency management. That was something I did. But I will say, in terms of the IEM perspective, and we'll talk more about this through our conversation here today, there are many ways to get involved, whether someone is pursuing a degree in emergency management, working with student chapters as part of the respective regions of the International Association of Emergency Managers, or again, joining, we have emerging professionals caucus for people to get engaged in. And again, we'll talk more about two ways to make those connections. It's really about identifying your areas of interest. And it's, as we all know, how important it is to create and build upon a network and find areas where you can generate someone who can help guide you, bounce ideas off in as you're going through your interest in this field, and probably on good days not be discouraged by some of the things, some of the hurdles and I call them the Jersey barriers that get dropped in front of you. But those are things that, again, it's very important to create that network, find mentors, and we'll talk more about that. But there's a lot of great opportunities, and it's just be open and engaging and find people that you can have real and honest conversations with, to ask them about the things that you're encountering in different. Now IEM is not just public sector emergency managers. I think you already talked about the fact that we have really spanned the entire spectrum of having the private sector, the voluntary organizations active in disasters. It's completely across the lifeline sectors and all of those things. So I will stop there, and I know we'll talk more about it as we continue our conversation.
Yeah, Sherry, you also had a different kind of point of entry within the emergency management realm. Would you like to discuss kind of your pathway and how that could be applied today?
So yes, so I've worked with associations ever since I left the Hill back in the early 90s. And with the Energy Marketers of America, we've realized after Superstorm Sandy in 2012, that there was really a need for more engagement on our part. And so that's what we started doing, just getting very involved in anything to do with disaster response. And that's just taken me to what has now become almost, 100% of my work. And that's how I moved into this field. And I love it. It's a very satisfying area to work in, because you feel like you really are helping people, which is great.
And then Marianne, you've kind of grown up FEMA, is that right?
Well, no, I mean, I worked in local government in New York City and in Philadelphia, and then I've been with FEMA now about 12 and a half years, but before that I spent about 10 years with local government. I think the advice I would give people is that, especially when you're coming in, whether it's a second career or this is your only career, is really diversifying your experience at the beginning of your emergency management career. It's important. It makes you a much more well-rounded emergency manager to have a variety of experiences. So even within an organization, let's say you like the organization you're in, look for different opportunities so that you can grow and develop, like through details or developmental assignments, training, get outside your comfort zone. I think that's one thing I would tell people. And then the other thing, the other piece of advice I would give you is that, kind of have an idea of where you want to go. Do you see yourself more in an operational track after you've done some exploring? Do you see yourself more in a mitigation track? Do you see yourself more on a policy track? And then what are the things that you need to do to advance in that particular track? You want to supervise people or lead an organization. What are the things that you're going to do along the way through your career that position you to be competitive for those opportunities? So really think about having a 3 to 5 year plan, which you're kind of adjusting on an ongoing basis, because no plan meets contact with the world and survives, but you can have an idea of where you want to go, and then as life happens, you can make adjustments.
Great point, Marianne. And I know from a local standpoint, having a less than overly active county, we really encourage our staff to seek out volunteer opportunities as well as EMACs when they are requested, so that they can get that firsthand experience that we don't always get to see in our own county. And Persia, I intentionally saved you for last because I know that you work with a lot of local universities and colleges and how to promote, entry into this field. So I wanted to hear your points as well with your current efforts.
Well, a couple of things, actually, Heather. I'm one of those people, and I think that there are a lot of women like me, or at least I think there are, that don't necessarily start in EM or have a good idea of what it is, what we do, that this is another career field that is a great option and fulfilling and can meet a lot of great needs career-wise, but they're just not aware of how wide this field is. So as someone that transitioned into it from somewhere else, because I like to say that God reinvented me, coming from a background that was, I had insurance on the private side of casualty and disaster, but also I retired from the military. There's a lot of skills that are there that you can parlay into something else. So for somebody transitioning, I would say getting more information about this big, wide emergency management field and all the possibilities where your particular skills can be really put to the test, and you can find something that you can sink your teeth into is going to be really important. And then, of course, looking long term, like Mary Ann said, in terms of what your interests are, communications or operations or logistics, or, maybe you want like swiftwater rescue, whatever your thing is. So, and if it's leadership, that's yet another thing, looking at the big picture of training or, reimagining what we do. Because one of the things that I'm hoping that to get into with these awesome experts on this panel is how we really look at the path to come into this field from a lot of women at universities that I've talked to, and they're sophomores or juniors or seniors, and they're just now realizing that emergency management is a thing. They were going to be a biologist or they were going to be a social scientist, and now they're thinking, how do I now get into that? So I'm definitely want to hear that from our panel, how they can do that, because I talk to them often, and it's a little bit difficult, you guys, to tell somebody that has student loans and has spent 3 years during biology or philosophy to say, hey, you need to go volunteer for a year. Yeah, I know you got student loans to pay, but you need to go volunteer and come in, at a different angle. But there's got to be a better way, I think, or at least teaching them how to take those skills and parlay them into something that matches in emergency management. Someone decided, and I didn't realize it at the time, that I was a relationship builder. And somebody said, hey, maybe you are. And along with background operation command and those things, it became a good fit for me, and big surprise for me, actually.
No, that's a great point, Persia. I think when many of us were in college, they didn't have an emergency management degree or focus area. I mean, I'm an economist by trade. So that's something I would love to open up the panel to is, there is a place for everyone, regardless of what your educational background is. They all have strengths and points of entry and points of contribution. If you guys want to, elaborate on that further, please open your mic.
You're right that Heather, that people really, we didn't have that option back when I was as an undergrad or graduate school. My focus was political science, and the closest I came to anything emergency management was basically just anything to do with terrorism or anything like that, with international relations. So yeah, no, absolutely no background in that.
And likewise, my undergraduate degree also was, it was in teaching speech communications. I wanted to be a journalist, and that's actually where I ended up, is in both radio and television. And when I started working for the state of Minnesota in a national disaster that happened, and I ended up being the state's lead PIO before there was even the incident command structure. And my point in sharing that is because one of the things that I've really tried to stress over the years is that it's those transferable skills. And particularly what Persia was talking about, and others are ready to build those relationships, and how understanding what is the emergency management role. We're still in that process of helping to share that with executive leaders, those that are making decisions, those at in our state, very rural areas where people don't know what the emergency manager does until the really bad day happens. But it's many times we focus on very technical skills. And a lot of times I've heard these skills, and this is where I'm going to, again, put in a plug, where we talk about soft skills. And I've challenged the thinking on that numerous times. I said, those skills are not soft. They're difficult and challenging. They're foundational skills. But if you can have those foundational skills, the ability to communicate, interpersonal skills, that influence, to build those relationships, those are the things that, regardless of what field you start in, they're transferable into this discipline. And those are the skills that are really going to be, we can teach technical skills. Those are going to be the skills that really build and help people, particularly females, be very successful within this discipline and field of study.
So you bring up a great point about the evolution of the emergency manager. I think even after this last, pandemic, we're still seeing the evolution of our field and the responsibilities that get handed to us. Because of the coordinative and the soft skills, the people relationship skills that we have from our standpoint. One of the questions in the chat that I think is relevant during this time is like, do any of you have any formalized mentoring or networking programs for women in emergency management or homeland security? I know we're going to talk about resources at the end, but are there any groups that you all in particular participate in?
Sorry to say, but no.
Well, and I see Charlotte is put in a couple of things here about this climb and lift. Yes, that is one that people have put together in the IEM perspective. Also, our training and education committee has worked on internships, more of, again, putting resource documents together and ideas to make those connections with local programs. Again, my personal experience in my day job in our Homeland Security and Emergency Management Division, we worked with very specific organizations at the local level that generated internship opportunities, starting with high school age, bringing in these individuals to see what this field was as they were looking at going to college, as an example. But it's creating those relationships as soon as possible to try to get that interest generated. And I know it's challenging, particularly with unpaid internships. And as we know, as a hiring manager myself, it's when people come out with a degree or that education, it's also challenging to get your foot in the door without that boots on the ground experience, at least basic experience. It's those things that we're trying to continue to build into resources so people can make those connections and help gain that entry into a paying job.
And I see in some of the chat, they've been pointing out some state or localized types of associations. I do know that we have one here in Region 3 that a lot of emergency managers, women in particular, are participating in. There's also Women in the Field. So there's a lot of localized things. So I would always encourage people to check their local, state, jurisdictional or regional type of organizations. Persia, did you have something to add?
Hey, Heather, I did, I like what Kathy said when she said that, soft skills, get sort of downplayed, but we know that these are the ones that help us to survive. And, I didn't know until right now, that Kathy and I were like cousins or whatever. I'm a speech comm major myself, speech communications, and that has led a lot to, my skills now. And I wanted to address quickly or mention it to Lisa. She put a question in our Q&A saying that she's a relationship builder with a legal background. I mean, I know exactly where she's at. My former director, Mike Sprayberry, he thought, hey, you would be great at building this private partnership program for us because we didn't have one. And I said to him, I'm not an emergency manager. And he said, I can teach you emergency management. I will mentor you if you bring those skills to building this program. So I think the other side of it is that as leaders, and this is across the board, we have to be willing to mentor those young people, women, folks that are from different backgrounds, all of the wealth of knowledge and skills and unique perspective that they can bring to our field. I mean, we can't close the door on that. And I think that if we are willing to mentor them and give them some of those opportunities, because I feel like he gave me a chance. My military background and, the command training and all that stuff I did for those years, certainly helpful. But the thing that comes to the floor are those soft skills, that Kathy talked about. I would love to hear what Mary Ann says about it, because from the FEMA standpoint, I mean, so many different areas to apply transferable skills, especially for folks that maybe they are in legal, like Lisa is, or they're somewhere else that can move into individual assistance or, PIO work or, or crisis legal work. I mean, we do that big here. So Lisa, I
Yeah.
would be happy to meet with you. I'll hit you on the side.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, I think it just goes back to what we were saying earlier, that emergency management is such a wide area of options that really anybody can find a place in emergency management, regardless of their background or their, or what they actually want to do. And so it's really about, is this profession of interest to you? And then really figuring out, okay, how do your interests match the profession? And, at FEMA, I mean, we have so many varied opportunities for people to work in our agency. And I think, you don't have to have a degree in emergency management to be a good emergency manager. And I know that might be radical for some people, but I absolutely want a diverse workforce. I mean, I think it would be a real hindrance if everybody in your organization only had an emergency management degree, because then you'll be limiting yourself. And again, you want to think about diversity. We need all kinds of people to come together to solve the hard problems that happen during disasters.
It's a great point, Marianne, and that actually can segue us easily into our next question. Most recently in every aspect of life, we've really seen this effort of allyship and how important that is. Empowerment is important. So how can others, best participate or continue their efforts in supporting women in and into this field? Marianne, since you've kind of led the way, I'd love to hear from you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for everybody, at every level, to be a good ally for those that are maybe not as represented in the workforce that you're in. And so, like, for women, making sure that women's voices are heard and they're at the table is really important. One of the things you can do in, like, just very practical, if you're in a meeting, just affirming what people say, like, for example, like, Kathy, that was a great idea. Let's talk more about that. And I think a lot of times, in the work environment, women's voices can be stifled because they're not asserting themselves as much. Maybe they have lack of confidence. I think that is an issue. I think myself, I have confidence issues, which may be hard to believe, but that's true. And, when you're facing uncertain environments, that can really become pronounced. So I think being a good ally is about lifting people up. It's about seeing the value that everybody brings to the table and then helping them affirm that, help them bring the best version of themselves to work. That's what good allies do.
Any other panelists like to contribute?
I just want to echo. Oh, go ahead, Persia.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
No, go ahead.
I want to echo Marianne. I mean, being a good ally, it's sometimes it means you need to get sometimes you need to get your hands dirty. I mean, we can't turn away when we witness unfair practices. We know something is unfair, and I think we have to speak up about it. I think we have a requirement as leaders to do that. I think that if somebody is trying their best and they're not getting a fair shake, I think that it makes sense, especially if they're in a group that typically is ignored, that they should be heard. We know that this is a whole community, so we cannot close the door on anybody. Young people these days are smart, they're driven. They're looking at us for guidance, mentorship, to show them direction. And I think we need to be ready to handle that. I will say, because we can talk because it's just us, that I heard a man say relatively recently, I heard him say that women are not leaders in emergency management because they don't want it as much as men. So I'll say that. He will never say that again. But the point is, sometimes you just have to stand up and say, hey, that's not fair. That if we want to really set a good example and we want to lay out into the future an accessible, equitable career that everyone could be welcome to come into, that we kind of have to think about, what we're setting up. Because people are retiring every day. We're losing all of this great institutional knowledge. Where are we going to get these future emergency managers from? I mean, it still boggles my mind. Mary Ann's background boggles my mind because it's like, how are they going to find another Mary Ann? I don't know how they're going to do that. But I would like to be the one that mentors that kid. You know what I mean? So my point is we can't turn away when we witness something that is an unfair practices, a disparaging remark, whatever that is. If it's going to harm everybody, we got to think more whole community. We're in it together. We have to think that way.
Kathy?
Sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
I was just going to, I too wanted to echo what Mary Ann started to say, and again, what Persia was just talking about. It's too often, and I'm the first person to say, I'm a sassy girl because I've had to be a sassy girl. And I say that with all respect because having to do exactly what I had heard Persia say would say, wait a minute, here's what I heard, here's what I saw. That is not acceptable. And here's how I recommend that we proceed with fill in the blank. That's hard to do, particularly if you're starting out. The other thing that, again, since we're in this conversation, I appreciate all the positive comments that are coming in the chat, bringing up the programs that exist in IAM or the partnership type programs. They're absolutely spot on. The other thing that I'm going to challenge, and we kind of talked about this as a group earlier, is really to other women. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. And it's very important to recognize that allyship that we talked about, that we're passionate. We all come with the different talents, unique things that to actually lift each other up. We don't always have to agree because we're seeking that diverse perspective, diverse backgrounds in representing the communities that we're employed to serve and help them remain safe and keep their lives in order. However, we need to do that in collaboration with each other and set aside and have respectful conversations in ways that we lift each other up and continue to expand the space. Because for those of us that are women in this field, it's improved, but it is not where I wanted to see. And before I leave this, and the other piece is about succession planning. To the point Persia raised in regards to Mary Ann, that my team and the people that I work with in collaboration, they're tired of hearing me say, how are we doing on succession planning? Are we documenting these things? And again, having it be on your standard operating guidelines in adherence to your policies and procedures, not on personalities. And again, take names off things and make them the position specific that can be transferred and tweaked. So those are just some suggestions, but I look forward to the opportunity to continue to encourage other young women to be fierce and to step forward and find those allies that will be right there with you in helping us all move forward.
Mary Ann, did you want to add? Oh, I'm sorry, Sherry.
Oh, no, I'm good. I think Kathy covered it. I know we have lots of cover, so.
All right, Sherry, please.
I was just going to say that it's also important that we recognize that people don't have to look and behave in the same way. I think sometimes young people think that they have to be have a certain style in order to get, to be heard and to have any authority. And it's really not true. I think as long as you're doing your work and you're putting in the time, you're going to be heard. as long as you're, asserting yourself at least a little bit. But we don't all have to look and behave in the same way.
It's interesting. Some of the things that I viewed when I first came into the workforce as flaws, such as my competitiveness or my aggressiveness, I have now transitioned into strengths and maybe changed the perspective of maybe not aggressive yet persistent, as a better narrative to who I am as a character in the field. There's been a couple of questions about advice coming into this career. Would you give that same advice today? What's some of the best advice that you've received? What are some of the most important tools that you leverage as women to be successful in this male-dominated field? Sherry, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Gosh, honestly, the only real tool I could say is just, again, just doing my work as well as I can and being as thorough as I can. There are, of course, there's an American Society for Association Executives, and that's good for people who, like me, work with an association, and they have some resources. But beyond that, I don't really have anything that I can offer. Sorry.
Nope. I think every perspective is important. Mary Ann.
I think the advice I would give people is that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that's the only way that you grow. And I know, like, and I think about my career, and the way that I've been able to improve is to just be in positions that are really uncomfortable and out of my normal way of doing things, like all of the assignments I've had over the years. And what I've learned from that is that it's, number one, I realized like I actually can do things that aren't just emergency management per se, but also like it builds my confidence. And so I think you gotta be uncomfortable. You only grow if you're uncomfortable. So that's my advice.
That's great. Kathy.
I would just completely echo what I just heard Mary Ann say. The only way is to continue to push forward and make yourself be uncomfortable for all the reasons you say. Now, and I'm just going to share, this is a personal thing, and it's like you're going, what is this woman with this color in her hair, and what are those things in her hair? I'm going to tell you that the 30 years ago woman would have never done that, because, oh, that's unprofessional. And what I have found is, first of all, I got over that. And it's a conversation starter, very interesting and unique, but it's getting out of your comfort zone, pushing yourself to actually demonstrate, because you know what you're talking about. And you, again, use those foundational soft skills to build those relationships, deliver on the results that you say that you can deliver. And again, have that ability to bring people together and communicate and be confident in what you are, and don't get easily discouraged, because many days it's the haters come out, and it's across the spectrum. And that's why you want to have people that you have the cone of trust, as I call it, with the team that you build, the people that you can have the real, honest, and authentic conversations about. Again, with my team back at my regular job, when we talk about things and I hear and I listen to them, and then we talk about a plan going forward, what I ask them is, what are we missing? Because I want all of those voices represented to encourage people to start, again, doing what Mary Ann laid out first. To grow and to continue to learn, you have to push yourself out of that comfort zone and know that you have people there supporting you to continue to help encourage you to do that.
No, great
I think-
point.
Was it Eleanor Roosevelt who said, do something every day that makes you uncomfortable? I think that's always that's good advice.
I think her exact quote is about challenging fear, because fear is the only way you will grow. So no, it's great. I have a lovely book of great quotes of great women that my husband gave me that I literally refer to every Thursday as my little terrific quotes. So that was a great point. Persia.
Well, Heather, I think I'm going to make a big sign that says "Be fierce," which is what I heard Kathy say. And I'm going to give a little, I'm gonna give a little tough love right now, because I think that as women, we need that. And so not just as women, minorities, folks that are part of the LGBTQ plus population, I want you to keep something in mind. The reality is, and when we talk about taking tough roles or coming out of your comfort zone, the reality is that sometimes there's nothing that you can truly do about what people think of you. This isn't something that can be legislated. So if tradition or culture or habit is driving them, don't wear yourself out trying to change people. Succeed in spite of what they think. That's your goal. That's how you change the perspective. That's how you widen the aperture. If you work to make sure that you're head and shoulders above the rest, if you think that way, then every time you go into a project, however hard, however different, with your eye, towards that goal, you being a minority or a woman or LGBTQ plus should never be the reason why you're kept from an opportunity. Don't stand for that. So let your performance be the reason why they can never tell you no. So that's what I would say. It's something that is something that has pushed me and propelled me. And I think that when we talk about obstacles, there was a question that I saw someone talking about challenges, and I can tell you that something little known about me, but I had to grow from it, and that is that I was the first woman to command at Fort Knox. Now, this was traditionally all men all the time. And so to be under the microscope for someone waiting for you to fail or waiting for you to have a problem, the big success for me was, having that textbook command. No one could say that because I was a woman, there was a problem, or was a female, as we say in the military. And I guess that's what I took from that you can't change people's thinking, but you can change their perspective by your example.
Mhm. I don't know if we'll have enough time, but I'm going to quickly throw this out here. Lauren had a question, and actually aligns with my next question for the panelists is, emergency management has really become accommodating of all phases of life. I recently gave birth to 2 lovely terrorists of toddlers, and I love them all the best, but they exhaust me. But it did really change my perspective within EM. But I'd like to transition to the panelists to talk about how emergency management has accommodated you and your changes in life, the phases of life that you have grown throughout your career. Marianne, please.
Well, I think I subscribe to the operating principle that you don't get everything at the same time, right? So you have to make, like anything in life, you have to make choices. And so I think it's unrealistic and really unhealthy for women in particular to think that they can do everything at the same level at exactly the same time. And so sometimes work is going to be a priority, sometimes family is going to be a priority, sometimes other things are going to be a priority. And so I think you just got to get really clear about what's the priority in your life at that moment, and then kind of orient yourself around that. But in terms of emergency management and balancing a family, it's challenging. I have a 10-year-old. I'm here in Florida for the week. I know it's Florida, it sounds great, but I'm in training in a windowless room that's over air conditioned, which is why I have 4 layers of clothing on right now. And I'm not home this week. I'm not going to be home next week. And that's, it's a challenge, but it's something that we've learned to accept, and we've organized our life around that. And that's, I have the luxury of that. Some people don't have that. And so, you have to think about how the work that you're doing matches where your life is, and you can make adjustments. And I think this is where, again, emergency management has lots of opportunities for people. So if like deploying to a disaster for 8 months doesn't work with your life, guess what? There's lots of other things that you can do and still positively contribute to the field of emergency management. And then later on, you could come back to that, So I think it's about just, again, being clear about what's important to you at that time, and then, making good choices and being okay with the fact that you can't be great at everything at exactly the same time. That's just really, I think that's an unhealthy burden that's placed on women. And, I think it's part of the reason why we have so much burnout in the profession, and I think why women feel so overwhelmed. And think about so many women have left the workforce since the pandemic. And I think it's because, again, they were trying to balance, you know, everything. And it's just not, it is not workable. Again, that might be radical, but again, that's just a realistic view of the world. And, you know, I think we just got to be realistic about what we can do.
Sherry, you're a private sector representative. I would love to hear your balance.
Well, for me, it's fairly simple. I don't have kids. I have 3 dogs, and they're not too demanding.
Fur babies are just as important.
They're just as important to me,
They
but
are.
you're right. They're not so demanding. And really, I just in general, my team at EMA, they've, you know, everyone has always been very accommodating. We have a lot of flexibility, which makes things, you know, when you need it, like Marianne was saying, when something else has become a priority at the moment, you're able to take care of that. And, you know, we work from home a lot of the time, as I'm doing right now. So very accommodating, I guess.
Kathy, how do you put the home back in Homeland Security?
You know, that's really interesting because this is an example of hindsight's 2020. And I appreciate hearing about deciding what the priorities are. And again, working in this for over 30 years. When I was first getting into the emergency management area, I had to respond and work towards those things. And again, thankfully, I had the support system where my children who were young at the time were able to be with family and their father and that type of thing. But here, the lesson learned from that was, again, being gone in the field for several weeks. And the only thing that the 6 and 7-year-olds saw was what they were talking about on television. And were sharing that information with their teachers at school. And the teachers were kind of like, oh my goodness. My point is, first of all, it helped me then learn the importance of preparing your family for being in this type of thing. Even my fur babies, it's like we learned how to be self-sufficient. And then when I ended up on an EMAC deployment that I got home the day of Thanksgiving, they were like, it was no big deal because they were used to that's how it was. What I have failed at, and I own it, is not putting me and the family first, but I've learned to do that. And so I think Marianne's point is excellent today, is that my needs were always secondary to my job's needs. And I don't think, you know, it's just learning, but waking up to the fact that the plus was we're well prepared as a family, and having kids who now continue to do that, that's all good, and share that with their friends. However, if I'm providing that insight to those that are starting out, make sure you do what you heard Marianne say, was establish your priorities, feel comfortable in setting those boundaries, taking care of yourself first, because you cannot take care of others unless you're at your best game. And then it is that opportunity. So after a long time, at least I acknowledge, yeah, I could have done better to begin with, but we're all good as a result of it. And if we have to leave in the middle of the night, even the animals have their bags packed and are ready to go.
Persia, you got the last minute.
I get the last minute. No, I think that, gosh, Marianne, Kathy, Sherry, great points to all of the panel. You know, you know, Heather, I remember being where you are with the very young kids, and you know, that's why Marianne's comments are so significant. You know what you can do right now with your priorities, which are these young babies that are so dependent on you. Because right now, you know, I'm the mother of dragons, you know, otherwise known as teenagers. It's a totally different perspective now. You know, they are independent. You know, they're doing things now. To Kathy's point, you know, the things that you wonder about trying to juggle this career, trying to set priorities, and for me, trying to look at a brand new program, and as a one-woman show. I mean, I left for Hurricane Florence, and you know, I had a 9-year-old that was saying, "Mom, I want a YouTube channel," and I thought, "Are you crazy? We're not doing that, honey." But 3 weeks later, while I was gone, I came back, and this kid has a business. You know, so it's independence. You know, okay, now he's an entrepreneur, but you know, I do look at that and go, and it was easy to blame my husband, like, "Aren't you watching these folks?" But they learned independence, to your point. And now he is a 14-year-old, really independent guy. And so I can't complain about that. So there are priorities to set. Having support is fantastic. I had great leadership support at my job for things that come up with kids, but I'm in a different place now. I can make different choices because they are, dragons ready to leave the nest.
Always an evolution. Dave, I see you pop up. That means we're transitioning, I believe.
And before you all go, I have to ask you right here and now in front of all these listeners, if you would come back for a longer webinar discussion, because we've gotten so much activity in the chat, a lot of great questions, such an important topic. I say, let's keep the discussion going.
I volunteer as tribute. I would love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I loved this session. Thank you so much for all the input, and I look forward to working with you all again very soon. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, Dave, over to
I
you.
was going to say the same thing. This was probably the most entertaining and informative 45 minutes of my life. And I can tell you, I'm married. I have 3 daughters. My dogs are female. My cats are female. I got 4 grandkids. 3 of them are female. And I have learned so much. As much as I've exposed, I've learned so much in these 45 minutes. And another 2 hours of this probably wouldn't hurt me. So thank you all for such an engaging and inspiring 45 minutes. Is awesome.